We're going to start by talking about what paraphrasing is. According to the OWL Purdue website, paraphrasing is writing in your own words. So a paraphrase can be your own rendition of essential information and ideas expressed by someone else presented in a new form. It's a legitimate way to borrow from a source when it's accompanied by accurate documentation, a big key here. And it's a more detailed restatement than a summary, which focuses concisely on a single main idea. This second point here, it helps you control the temptation to quote too much. I can tell you as a past student that I feel almost as though there's a progression where when you're starting to write these research papers, you're learning about quoting and including direct quotes, and you have to back up everything with evidence to support your arguments and all that. I know that I was definitely guilty of having papers filled with direct quotes. It looks clunky, it shows that maybe you didn't work as hard as you could to summarize information and put things into your own words. So as you kind of progress through the master's program, higher in academia, it's really a valuable skill to start to paraphrase much more than you quote directly. What I've learned in the past is to save direct quotes for information that either is said in such a powerful way by the author, or there's really not much else you can say to summarize it. So maybe something with a lot of numbers in it, a lot of statistics, things like that, or the author says something very concisely. But try to use as few direct quotes as humanly possible and paraphrase. It also helps in cutting down on long quotes. Like, you don't want to, as they said here, it's better than quoting information from an undistinguished passage. You don't want to include a long direct quote that is really there just to fill space. We've all done it, we're all guilty of it, quoting just to get to our page limit or that kind of thing. But now that you're in a master's graduate program, it's really important that you start paraphrasing more than direct quoting. So, getting off my soapbox now, here are the 6 steps to effective paraphrasing. First, reread the original passage until you understand its full meaning. Then set the original aside and write your paraphrase on a note card. Jot down a few words below your paraphrase to remind you later how you envision using this material. At the top of the note card, write a key word or phrase to indicate the subject of your paraphrase. Check your rendition with the original to make sure that your version accurately expresses all the essential information in a new form. Use quotation marks to identify any unique term or phraseology you have borrowed exactly from the source. Record the source, including the page, on your note card so that you can credit it easily if you decide to incorporate the material into your paper. Now, that seems like a lot of work, but as you get used to the paraphrasing techniques, you can probably cut down on some of these steps. But if you're really new to paraphrasing and you're not sure if you're doing it correctly, or anything like that, it's a good idea to try to do this, at least for some of the paraphrasing that you do in your papers. So here are some examples. They have the original passage listed here. So this is the actual information that's in this source. A legitimate paraphrase of this original passage would be written here. And if you read over these, you can see that the legitimate paraphrase, it's definitely in the writer's own words. It's not just kind of rearranging some words in this passage or anything like that. It's not taking out every third word and going into a thesaurus and looking for a synonym and adding that in here. So then we move into an acceptable summary, and they've kind of cut down their paraphrase to turn it into a summary version. And here's a plagiarized version. And as you can see, this is sort of like a thesaurus-happy plagiarism. The students often, instead of frequently, use too many instead of overuse. They have direct quotations. They changed in to when. They take notes as opposed to taking notes. As a result is changed to resulting. So clearly, and again, I will own up to it, this is how I kind of thought paraphrasing went when I first started doing it. I figured, oh, I'm not using the exact same words, so it's okay. But truly, you're really taking the essence of what this writer, James Lester, wrote. And as we talked about in plagiarism, it's really considered a form of theft in academia. So you want to make sure that you're either doing a more general summary, or if you want some more detail, a legitimate paraphrase where you're really putting it in your own words. You shouldn't be sitting there with the original passage open, just kind of going in and changing some of the words, but keeping the same structure of the phrase. So now we'll look at some ways to avoid plagiarism. And this is the other website that I had listed and will include for you to check out at your leisure. This is from the Writing Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. There are a lot of great web resources out there about plagiarism and paraphrasing if you want any further help with this. So they're talking about successful versus unsuccessful paraphrases. Now, this is very similar to what we looked at on the Purdue OWL site. Here's the passage as it appears in the source, and here is word-for-word plagiarism. We did in one of these past presentations talk about turnitin.com, so you can imagine that these red sections, this is where turnitin.com would have a nice red highlight and show where this information was found. So as you can see, this person, they kept basically whole sentences in here. They changed just some of the words. And also, you can look at, in this open heart surgery unit, the nurse manager hires and fires the nursing personnel. So just because they took out this section of the sentence here doesn't mean they did not plagiarize this section right here, as you can see in the red. So they have on each shift, they took that. They changed, instead of a nurse assumes the role of resource nurse, they wrote a resource nurse attends to. So they're kind of doing the same thesaurus, melding things together. And this is considered plagiarism. This is not paraphrasing. So why is this plagiarism? The writer has not only borrowed Chase's material, the original author, with no acknowledgement. Oh, I didn't even notice that. So they didn't even actually cite this, any of this. They didn't even remotely pretend that this is a paraphrase and put the author in here. They just took the whole thing. The phrases in red are directly copied. They've maintained the author's method of expression and sentence structure. And here we go. Even if the student writer had acknowledged Chase as the source of the content, the language of the passage would be considered plagiarized because no quotation marks indicate the phrases that come directly from Chase. So think about this as all of these highlighted red sections, these really should be sitting in quotation marks. If quotation marks did appear around all these phrases, this paragraph would be so cluttered that it would be unreadable. So here's a patchwork paraphrase. And again, they're still keeping kind of chunks of text from the original source. So it's a patchwork composed of pieces of the original author's language and pieces of the student writer's words. They're rearranged into a new pattern, but they haven't actually put any of these borrowed pieces in quotation marks. So even though the writer is acknowledging the source of the material, they have Chase 1995 up here, the underlined phrases are falsely represented as the student's own. So still plagiarism. And here they give us a legitimate paraphrase. It's pretty lengthy, but worth a read. We'll talk about why this is a good paraphrase. When you read through, you'll notice that the writer has documented Chase's material and specific language. You can see they are citing Chase here. They do an appropriate paraphrase here that doesn't take anything directly from Chase's work. When they do talk about this hierarchy of seniority, they included in quotation marks indicating that it directly comes from Chase's article, and they give the page number. The writer has modified Chase's language and structure and added material to fit the new context and purpose. So they've also added their own ideas into the paraphrase. Okay. So here's an important point to keep in mind about shared language. So in every discipline in certain genres, so including social work as a discipline, some phrases are specialized or conventional, so you can't paraphrase them except by wordy and awkward, fun word, circumlocutions that would be less familiar and thus less readable to the audience. So you are allowed to repeat phrases that would fall into this category, and that's not considered stealing the unique phrasing of an individual writer. So they talk about these words for this nursing example, but for social work, this could be something like trauma-informed care or cognitive behavioral therapy, things like those. They're just considered shared language and you don't actually have to cite them. So those are the basics of paraphrasing and avoiding plagiarism, which is always what we're trying to do in writing. And I hope that you found this helpful. Thank you.